Those of us who lived down at Danville among the icebergs and the Eskimos, that anyone who left their warm fireside tonight was a rugged individualist in the very best sense of the word. And I want to disarm you right away of the fact that I am a professor. 2 months ago, we talked something about the early settlement of the city of Lewiston. Lewistown plantation. It was probably the only early settlement, perhaps in this state, that had a sawmill before it had settlers. At the time, Colonel Moses Little provided a mill for settlers to be. There were only 2 permanent settlers in the whole plantation. We noted that following that mill development, and within the next few years, Lewiston became a very prolific producer of lumber. That by 1810 there were no less than 5 very busy sawmills. There were 2 grist mills, and the population was still a little under 300. So that at the very outset of Lewiston's settlement, it seems clear that it was destined to be a manufacturing community. The fact that it turned to textiles was also indicated very early. Because in 1809, Colonel Josiah Little built a fulling and carding mill, one of the first in this area, of course. There were none anywhere in the state at that time, north of the Mayu Mill at Gray, Maine. So that at a very early date, it was clear that Lewiston was destined to be an industrial center. Colonel Little and his associates operated this mill until 1814, when it was destroyed by fire, probably of an incendiary nature. And at the urging of the community in 1819, rebuilt the mill. And at that time, he brought to Lewiston Dean Fry of Brunswick, a man who had had a great deal of experience in the manufacture of cloth, and who was the ancestor of the Fry family in Lewiston, one of the most prominent families in the city, not only at that time, but in after years. The new mill operated until 1834, when it was converted and looms were brought in for the first time. And it continued in operation till about 1852, when a flood on the Androscoggin River undermined it, and it fell into the river and went downstream. There was organized shortly after, in 1836, the old Lincoln Mill. The mill itself, the building itself, was not built until 1845, although the organization had been set up 9 years earlier. And that was prompted and promoted by local interests. This mill operated for a great many years and produced a profit and attracted the attention naturally of others who were interested in textile manufacturing. Consequently, Lewiston became the object of investigation by outside financial interests, and with the aid of the little family, became, by the middle of the last century, a thriving and promising textile empire. Two things were particularly important in bringing textile mills to Lewiston on a large scale. First was the organization and completion of the Androscoggin and Kennebec Railroad, which ran from Danville Junction to Waterville, and at Danville connected with the Atlantic and St. Lawrence, which ran from Portland to Montreal. And the second important link in the chain of development was the building of the canals. It was a long, long process. It was promoted in the first place by the little family, the canal proposition, when in 1836 there was incorporated the great Androscoggin Falls, Mills, Dams, and Canal Company. Well, that's kind of an awkward title, so in 1845 it was changed to the Lewiston Water Power Company. And immediately there was brought to Lewiston by the Littles an engineer from Boston to lay out the possibility of diverting the waters of the Androscoggin River into canals along which manufacturing plants could be located. After a long series of surveys, in 1850, work was begun on the original canal, and by 1851 it went as far as the first cross canal as it exists today. Immediately, power in this volume was available. A group of financiers began the organization of the Bates Mill, named for Benjamin Bates. He was not only prominent in its management, but in his time the largest stockholder. Immediately after the canal was completed for the first section, the first Bates Mill, construction of the first Bates Mill was begun, was completed late in 1851 and went into operation in 1852. And immediately the first section was in operation, another section was built, Bates Mill number 2, along the same line as Bates Mill number 1, and along with the continuation of the construction of the canal. And then there followed shortly after the organization of the Hill Mill, also on the canal, and that went into operation in 1854. So that at a very early time, more than 100 years ago, the city of Lewiston became the textile capital of northern New England. To be sure, Lynn, Massachusetts, and some other Massachusetts communities were active in textile manufacturing.